how would you like to set up chapter 5? We're kind of talking about renouncing the world, not renouncing the world. What other contexts do we have?
Haribo, I thought we could very quickly go again from 2 to 5, like very, very quickly, and then focus on two huge topics, which the texts that we covered in class this past Friday highlights. How's that?
Sounds great. Yeah.
Okay. So again, we're in chapter 5. Chapter 2, Krishna is letting us know you are not matter or the material body. You are spirit or the soul. And those two things are quite different. With that knowledge, you should do your duty and not be attached to the results. Then, well, but what if I am still attached to the results? Okay, then still be somewhat attached, but recognize that there's something higher than you. You live in a world where so many different forces are impacting your life, and we should understand we are not the controllers of it all. So that would create some detachments due to this higher understanding, right? I can't control everything, so I have to start letting some things go. I will engage in sacrifices. For example, offering our food to God before eating is something that can easily be done, is powerful, and it keeps us connected to something higher, right? Because if we are constantly reminded we are eating oftentimes throughout the day, and we have that superior nature in mind, so that eventually that is going to turn into something much deeper, spiritually deeper, right? Then now we are then progressing to, all right, but then there's seems to be two groups of spirituality, one which is more inactive, other which is more active. Of these two, which one is better? And essentially we've been discussing that as a main theme after these two big punches of knowledge was given to us, right? One, that we are spirit souls, eternal spirit souls, and two, that because we are here temporarily in these material bodies, we should do our duty and not be attached to the results. And then we are now discussing, okay, but of the two spiritual paths, the more active versus the more inactive in the world, which one is better? And it takes us here to chapter 5. What do you think about that super high level context, Kim?
Yeah, that's a really nice summary, especially how it focuses on being in this world, not being in this world. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so then we are right here on chapter 5. The first text we cover reads the following. Text 14 of chapter 5. The embodied spirit, matter of the city of his body, does not create activities, nor does it induce people to act, nor does it create the fruits of action. All this is enacted by the modes of material nature. Just in case this is the first episode somebody may be listening to, the city of his body really means our body, and the embodied spirit, that's us, that's the soul. So the soul within the body here is being compared in an analogy to the city of 9 gates, the 9 openings of our body. So text 15. Nor does the Supreme Lord assume anyone's sinful or pious activities. Embodied beings, however, are bewildered because of the ignorance which covers their real knowledge. Text 16. When, however, one is enlightened with the knowledge by which nescience is destroyed, then his knowledge reveals everything as the sun lights up everything in the daytime. So those are the 3 texts that we covered. And we have 2 huge topics here to discuss based on these 3 texts. And I thought that what we could do in order to unpack these big topics is to introduce them, first of all, again, for the sake of someone who may not be familiar with these topics and how huge they are, I thought that we should introduce the topics and then dive into the texts, these three texts that we just read, and how it carries a huge implication and it sheds a big light in these two topics that we will discuss. How is that, Kim?
Yeah, that sounds like a good approach.
Would you like to introduce the two topics?
Yeah, well, the first topic of a pure soul theology or pure soul ontology is the idea that every soul is pure. I remember this topic or this idea was very interesting to me when I first started coming around to the temple, because I grew up in a Protestant Christian religion where we were taught the minute you're born, you sinned within the first 5 seconds and you're a sinner your whole life. And it was a very bleak outlook. And also coming from the energy worker world, a lot of them believe that, oh, there are souls in this world that are just evil and there's really no hope for them. So coming into this tradition where, no, it means some looking at some hard truths that may be hard to accept of, yeah, that means a child molester or a murderer, mass murderer has a pure soul. And so it opens up a lot of other questions like, okay, if that's the case, then where does evil come from? So then we start to get into some really deep, heavy conversations about it, which are good. What I also appreciate about this tradition is that our teacher, Tukram Prabhu, he never shies away from any tough question, and he always has a very logical answer to the question.
Right. And as I was listening to you describing the intricacies of a soul that is born sinful already, something else came to my mind, which is where that thought, that worldview could lead you, especially psychologically speaking, right? As we are still not fully enlightened beings, we're still subject to the conditioning of our psychology and our society at large. It seems to me that it's quite self-evident that if you are being told by your religious or spiritual leaders that you're a sinner within 5 seconds of birth, that would lead me to be fearful, because it's like, okay, I've done something wrong. And then now with the introduction of the eternal hell, which again, this is, Christianity, not what we're talking about here. To me, it seems to be, it goes hand in hand. You're a sinner, and if you don't get rid of your sins, you're going to go to hell forever. There's a huge terror. Like, I'm terrified by that thought. Hell is a really painful place, and ever is a really long time. So who wants to be in a really painful place for eternity, for a really long time? That's terrible. But to me, that is married to the idea that I'm a sinner, right? Because I only go to that eternal hell if I am a sinner. And if I'm being told, hey, after I was born, I'm already a sinner, then my destination is eternal hell. Unless I do whatever it is that whatever religion is postulating that possibility tells me to do, right? Then I can get out of this sinner predicament. So yeah, I think there's another implication. It's the implication of embracing religious tradition, embracing religious practice due to fear of the fact that I am a natural born sinner. And as such, my ultimate destination is hell. Therefore, I'm going to embrace all my religious activities because I want to escape that painful, eternal condition. And that's religion driven by fear. So to me, that's another implication. Like obviously what we're discussing here in Krishna consciousness is spirituality or religion driven by love, not by fear. And the other point you introduced, which is the second point, second big topic that we want to discuss here, is okay, so if we are pure souls, if we're going to embrace that as reality, that's the ontology of the soul. If that is true, then rapists, murderers, and so on, then aren't they bad people? Are you telling me that they are still pure? And if we're saying yes, then introduces this topic, right? The topic of the problem of evil in the world of theology and philosophy. That's how this is introduced, the problem of evil. So if the soul is pure, then where does evil come from? Where these actions that this so-called pure soul is engaging in, let's say a rapist, a terrorist, or like where did the pure soul go wrong? Like the pure soul is there, but is acting in such a malevolent way. So where does the evil come from then if it's not from the pure soul, right? So that's the other huge topic. And along the line, the verses that we just read, and again, I guess I'm going to start crossing over to how the three texts that we just read are directly related to these two huge topics in theology and philosophy throughout millennia. These are topics that have been discussed by Socrates and Plato and Aristotle. This is 2,000 years, well, I'm sorry, let me see. This is 500 years before Jesus Christ. Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, they were around 500 years before Christ. So this is at least 2.5 millennia here that these topics have been discussed. So this is a huge, really big topics with real big implications. So now, again, to start crossing over to our texts here, text 15 complicates the idea of where does evil come from even more, because now in text 14, the text is saying that, hey, the embodied spirit, master of the city of his body, does not create activities. So it's not creating any activities. But then he's also saying, nor does it induce people to act. So then I'm not influencing other people to act either. Nor does it create the fruits of actions. So the activities that I engaged in, and therefore the results of those activities, I'm not even creating those fruits of those actions either. All of this is enacted by the modes of material nature. So my actions, the fruits of my actions, the way in which I influence other people to act, none of that is me doing. I'm not responsible for any of that. And then when I say me, I really mean the soul, right? Not the body, not my psychology. I mean the eternal spirit soul. I'm not doing that. But to further complicate this problem of evil is text 15, which says, nor does the Supreme Lord assumes anyone's sinful or pious activities. I can read this in another way, which is still very, very chaste to the text. Nor does the Supreme Lord becomes responsible for people's sinful or pious activities. So now that is begging the question, well, if I'm not responsible for my actions or the fruits of my actions, and therefore no other embodied souls are responsible for their actions and the fruits of their actions either. But then the Supreme Lord, or let's say God, Krishna, he is also not responsible. He doesn't take responsibility for our actions, good or bad, or the fruits of our actions, good or bad. So then he's begging the question, well, where does evil come from? Where do these bad actions come from? And hence the philosophical theological debate for millennia called the problem of evil. Where does evil come from? So where does it come from, Kim?
Well, it starts in your own backyard.
That is right.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting that the Vedic texts don't even address the problem of evil, because to them it just doesn't even exist. It's like, why would we talk about it? It doesn't exist. So that's an interesting starting point.
Yeah, let's dichotomize that, right? Let's talk about Eastern versus Western spiritual thought. In the Western spiritual thought, I mentioned Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates. That's like as east as we can go, but it's still part of the West, right? Not really crossing over to the real East that we're talking about here. Yeah, that's a problem in the West. Like we're pondering over this. But in the East, it's not even, it is automatically assumed that it's your fault. It's not God's fault. That's step number one, right? But then the text here is saying, well, it's not your fault because you're not causing this activity. So then what is it? Well, it is ignorance. It is ignorance. It is forgetfulness. The forgetfulness of who we truly are. We are eternal souls, which is spiritual, who are always pure, full of knowledge and bliss. However, we have desires, souls that carry desires. Because we are part of Krishna, like literally a part of Krishna. Krishna is the supreme whole spirit, and we are tiny fragments of Krishna. And Krishna has unlimited desires. However, he also has unlimited power with which he can fulfill his own desires. We don't have that. Because we are part of Krishna, we also have desires, but we do not have the capability of fulfilling our own desires. So, therefore, the soul has these desires, and we could misuse God's given free will. God gives us free will. With our free will, we can choose to live in the way we want to live. The natural way of living, our original position, is that because we are part of Krishna, we're going to attain happiness by satisfying Krishna. Then we are automatically satisfied as well because we are part of Krishna. The analogy that is often given to illustrate this point is the hand in relationship to the body. In relationship to the body, the hand is just a part and the body is the whole. If the hand picks up some food stuff and puts it in the mouth, and which then goes to the stomach, let's say the stomach is the root, that energy, that satisfaction of having eaten something good is going to spread to the whole body, which includes the hand. And therefore, the hand gets its nutrition and its satisfaction by fulfilling the whole. So that is our natural state. If we are liberated spirit souls, we are loving God. We are engaging in actions of love towards God. We call that devotional service. Because of that free will, we can also misuse it. We have to have that free will because it is necessary for the best possible love. The best possible love is the love where I choose to love my beloved. And if I was forced to love God, that wouldn't be the best possible love because I'm being forced to love God. Therefore, free will becomes a necessary part of the best possible version of love. And because I have that free will, and because I am tiny and not all knowledgeable as Krishna is, I am subject to misusing my free will. And if I misuse my free will, I can start to try to fulfill my desires separate and independent from Krishna, not fulfilling Krishna's senses and desires so that I become happy, which is natural, but instead I can misuse my free will and start to think, I want to fulfill my own desires separate from Krishna, individually, just me, myself. I don't want to have Krishna around anymore. Well, Krishna knows that he won't force us to love him. He's granted us free will. And he wants to be engaged in a eternal loving, best possible love relationship with us. And in order to take us away from that misuse of free will, he granted us the opportunity to actually experience what would it be like to fulfill our desires separate from Krishna, separate from himself. Hence, the entire cosmic manifestation is created so that we can fulfill this, let's say, foolish desires, because they're never actually going to be fulfilled. So now we find ourselves here. God is not apparently visible. It's not obvious that God is everywhere. Well, he did that on purpose. He created a cosmic manifestation, hiding himself so that we are not always relating all of our actions and thoughts to him. We are now seemingly away from him. He's nowhere to be seen, at least in the eyes of a materialist. You cannot see God, you cannot experience God. Where is God? All that you're left now is the thought of I and mine, which is what will guide you through your entire life. It is going to be my job, my spouse, my children. I am hungry, I am sad, I am happy, I am whatever. And our entire lives are going to be centered around ourselves. We call that an egocentric life, where your own ego, meaning the sense of self, that I am this body and mind, I am this material body and this material mind, I am that. And that becomes the center of our consciousness, the center of our desires, to fulfill the foolish desires of I and mine. And then we engage in those activities that will fulfill essentially the senses of the body, which includes the mind, whether it is a sense of intellectual fulfillment that we are desiring, or a more physical fulfillments that we are desiring, whether through sexual activities or to eating foods or to exercising or to taking drugs, whatever it is that is physical. And we want to fulfill those desires. It is nevertheless my desires. I am the center. That's exactly and that's precisely what we mean by an egocentric lifestyle, egocentricity, where Krishna is not part of it. So now we are free to fulfill the senses of our material bodies without Krishna. And therefore we are here. But now we truly have to have the ability to fulfill these foolish desires of ours, right? There comes ignorance. I am now thinking I am this body and mind. I am forgetful of the fact that I am a part and parcel of Krishna, and that I truly should be satisfying him in order to become truly satisfied myself. And now I am forgetful of that fact. That is the beginning of ignorance. That's really what we mean by ignorance here. Forgetting the fact that I am part and parcel of Krishna, spiritual. But I am now thinking I am this body, and therefore I want to fulfill the demands of the body and mind. That forgetfulness is the genesis of my ignorance. Now, in that ignorance, I'm going to start acting in the world. And it can be good, philanthropic actions, actions of compassion to my fellow human beings, right? Or people that will serve the country. They're going to engage in military science to protect the country against other countries. That's, you know, God bless the United States of America and annihilates the other country. Anyways, that's another topic. But again, these are seen by society as noble activities. I'm going to serve my country. I am going to engage in philanthropic actions. And then there are the bad actions, right? They're obviously bad. I'm going to get intoxicated and I'm going to go and rape somebody, or I'm going to steal from others. Those are actions driven by intense hate and anger and greed, right? And here we are acting in this way in the world, right? But then when you start crossing over to this more, let's say, dark actions driven by greed and lust and anger, the only reason, the necessary reason why I am able to act in this manner, in anger, hate, lust, etc., is because I am thinking I am this body and this mind, and I'm acting this way. And I am creating, therefore, so much suffering, not only for myself, but for others. And then now, when there are enough people acting in this negative way, now we are causing the suffering at a much higher level. Now we are engaging in animal slaughter, not only causing sufferings and pains to humans, but also animals. So then now as a society, if I am engaging in those actions and causing sufferings to animals and or to other countries, let's let's bomb them. Let's send a bomb to that other country and let's annihilate them, or Hitler type of thought. Let's get rid of all the Jewish people, or Mao or Stalin, and let's annihilate hundreds of millions of people. That's all centered in greed, hate, lust, and anger, right? So then now when we start engaging in this self-centric, bad karmic actions and reactions, that's really what creates all the suffering in the world. All the greed of people that are rich wanting more money and power, and therefore people that are less educated or aware of their potential become more and more poor and suffering more and more, getting into more depression, getting into more basic needs that aren't met. And hence, evil comes about. More and more malevolence, true malevolence is then displayed in the world. And then we are impacted by the suffering. And that's truly where the suffering comes from. Where the evil comes from is beginning by forgetting that I am actually part and parcel of Krishna, truly believing I am this body and mind, which is doomed to failure because we're going to get old and die. And the grass is greener on the Joneses, right? We are going to become envious. We are going to become sad, and we are going to become revengeful and vindictive. It's just a matter of time. We're going to have those experiences. We are going to get something cool, which then loses its taste. Let's say a car, and then we now are sad because the car doesn't fulfill our desires anymore, and then now we have to go for something more, but that requires more effort, and that more effort will drive me crazy because now I'm just working and then I'm not relaxing and I get depressed. So inevitably we are going to find the pitfalls of being embodied, and then evil will come from that. So what do you think, Kim?
Yeah, I really like how you've illustrated how it's just a snowball effect. You just start at the very beginning, and you make one decision, and then it starts to become this perpetuating cycle of what you just said. Oh, okay, I got this, what I desired, and now it's just not quite good enough. Now I want something bigger and better. And in class last night, or on Friday, Tukram highlighted or answered a big question that I had was, okay, if you start with a pure soul, and that pure soul would want to love God, would want to choose God, I couldn't quite bridge that gap of how do you start to go down that path. And when Tukram Prabhu said, well, God creates you with just a little bit of ignorance, then that made complete sense to me. Because if we did not have any ignorance, we would always choose the good over the bad. And then now we're getting back to being an automaton, always choosing God, not really having true love. It's more of a forced love, so to speak. So effectively, we would not have free will. So just being created with that little bit of ignorance, just a little bit of power, a little bit of leeway can just lead us to where we are today, very enmeshed in our choices. So
I think that's a very interesting point because you're talking about a little bit of ignorance. And I tried to address that as I was speaking earlier. But now that you brought that up, I want to expand it. This ignorance, to me, wasn't satisfying because I'm saying, okay, oh, God gave me a little bit of ignorance, or it is my ignorance that causes me to act in this way. Well, then ignorance itself would be evil because it is then the impetus for all sufferings, right? And then I sat with that, like, what is ignorance then? Is it like is it spiritual? Is it material? Like, where does it play a role? Like, who could, like, and then if God created it, then God created that thing which gives rise to evil. Again, and then like circular reasoning right now, right? We are right back to where does evil come from, right? So Ignorance, yes, but I think there is something which I think is a little bit more clarifying or satisfying. I think is a little bit more anticipating further arguments for the problem of evil. And I think explains things a little bit better. It's less abstract and a little bit more concrete, at least to me, in my understanding, which is forgetfulness. I think forgetfulness ultimately takes us to ignorance because it is the beginning of ignorance. I am forgetting who I am and I'm thinking that I'm somebody else. That's ignorance. But then ignorance then develops your malevolence, your evil deeds in the world. But the original that God creates us with a little bit of is the tendency to misuse our free will because we are giving free will. Therefore, automatically it is implied there's a 50-50. You can choose to do right or you can choose to do wrong. So 50-50 is innate, is inherited with free will. And because we are not all omniscience like God is, because we are fallible, like God is infallible, we are fallibles. So because we are fallible and we have the 50-50 chance of using our free will right or wrong, when we choose to misuse it, God then will give us forgetfulness, forgetting of who we are, so that we can truly be away from him. Because otherwise, God is everywhere. God is everything, moving and non-moving. God is that from which everything comes. So how could you ever be in a place where, well, God is not a part of it? Well, only if you forget truly who you are and you are placed in a place where your senses prevents you from seeing God. Only then you could truly exercise your free will to try to fulfill your desires separate from God, right? So yes, like that ignorance to me is sometimes a bit abstract. I like to think of it as forgetfulness of who I am. That's what God gives me, because that is not evil in itself. That's why I think I prefer that, because ignorance itself could be evil. Forgetfulness itself is not, because I'm here forgetful and so are you. You're there thinking that you are an Asian woman. I'm here thinking I am an African man. That's only due to our forgetfulness. But that forgetfulness is neither good or, I mean, it's necessary in order for us to not be here with God, but it's not in itself evil, because I can choose, even within my forgetfulness, which is where I find myself now, I can still choose because of my free will to now start acting in devotional service and go back to God. So if God gave me forgetfulness, he's not necessarily giving me something which is evil, that is only going to be expanded in my journey in the material creation. But that seed of evil was given to me. I don't like that. There's a defect to me, because God already gave me the seed of evil, which is ignorance. But forgetfulness is neither bad or good. I just forgot. Now what do? I can remember and I go right back. Or I can continue to be forgetful and act badly. Does that make sense? What do you think about that, Kim?
Yeah, I really like that, because that was a good question about, okay, ignorance could be evil. I could definitely see that. So forgetfulness, and the idea of forgetfulness is, I don't know, it's comforting to me to know that, okay, at the soul level, beneath all these layers of all of our choices and going down the wrong path and creating this karma for ourselves, the idea that our soul desires to love God, and how you were describing being part and parcel of God and of Krishna, it's innate in the soul to want to love God. And so just getting back to that place of remembering God, I like that
Right.
idea.
Like another analogy, which I think is quite suitable for this point, is when you fall asleep and you start to dream, right? In rapid REM cycle. There has to be the components of forgetfulness in order for the dream to truly sound to truly, for you, in order for you to truly have an experience that your dream is real, that there has to be a component of forgetfulness. Because let's say if you are not forgetful of the thought that actually, in reality, I'm kind of just laying in bed right now. I'm laying in bed, I'm super relaxed, is, perhaps 2 in the morning, it's all dark, and everybody around me is sleeping. That's actually the truth, let's say, hypothetically speaking. But in my dream, I'm being chased by a tiger, or there's this big wave that is coming and I'm trying to go away from this wave, or I'm falling down or something. And I truly believe that to be true. Just like we truly believe that we are these bodies and minds. Well, in order for that to really be true, in order for you to really be able to embrace yourself and not as a spirit soul, in order for yourself to truly have the experience that you were indeed being chased by a tiger, or that a huge wave was going to come and swallow you, or that you're falling down some bottomless pit, in order for you to truly experience that as being real, you have to forget the fact that I'm actually just laying in bed sleeping. Like, it's quite like ironic, because you're laying in bed super relaxed to the point that you're asleep. But you have to forget that fact. And you really believe that you are here in danger, right? And forgetfulness is a necessary, crucial point of that, and it allows you to experience your experience as real, allow you to still exist as a sleeping body, but then when you wake up, you remember, actually, that tiger was not even real. That was just a dream. I'm actually here. This is who I am. And that forgetfulness is not necessarily evil, I would say. Because even in my dream, forgetting that I am actually just sleeping, if I was to remember, actually, I'm just laying in bed sleeping right now, and this is just a dream, it's not even real. So then let me start acting in a cohesive way. And then I start to remember. And then I wake up, and everything is good. So that forgetfulness can bring me back as well. Because in that forgetfulness, I can be using my free will to do something that is devotional service.
Yeah, and well, it kind of relates to the whole argument of where does evil come from, and suffering in the world that people are always struggling with, and they want to blame God. And it's so merciful, I think, of God to even create karma, or to allow karma, so to speak, not necessarily create it, but allow karma to encourage people, push people towards what is true, and what lessons they need to learn. And because otherwise we could be just going out in circles and circles for millennia and never learning our lessons, never remembering God, and never coming back to God.
Now, I think we've explored the problem of evil a lot, and what goes hand in hand as the other topic we want to discuss today is the pure soul theology, right? So these texts that we just read, they are in a nutshell saying, hey, you, the spirit soul, you're not doing anything. Like these actions, that's not you doing it. It's material nature that is enmeshing us all. Either goodness, passion, or ignorance is driving us, not us, the soul, but the body and the mind, to act in the world. But the soul himself is not actually herself. The soul herself is not doing anything. I can't just say that and continue. I have to expand on what I mean. Krishna is the enjoyer. All the other parts and parcels of himself, the souls, are the enjoyees. That's why we are the servants and Krishna is the master. The original enjoyer is the male. He enjoys. That's his position. God is the only true enjoyer that exists. We are his servants. It doesn't mean that we don't enjoy. We also enjoy. We also have pleasure in pleasing him. But because his position is to be the enjoyer and we are the enjoyee, those who give pleasure to him, the enjoyer, then The soul is better conceived as female, and God, the supreme soul, is better conceived as male, the truly only one enjoyer, and the souls are all enjoyees, and therefore better conceived as females. But anyways, that's a whole other topic that we can get into maybe in another podcast, or when the Gita touches on that point. So the soul herself, now I can use that language, is not doing anything, right? Is just there, and material nature is enmeshing in us all in ignorance, passion, and goodness, and these activities are going about seemingly automatically. And the soul is still pure. The soul is not herself committing all these actions. It's just having the experience of what is it like to try to enjoy without God. I want to be separate from God. I want to enjoy by pleasing myself and one another without God. So the soul is just sitting there as the passenger in a fully automated, fully autonomous car. You just sit there and the car is just doing its thing automatically. Similarly, the soul is sitting in the heart, physically speaking, in the center of the heart is where the soul is located. And these activities are just, we're compelled to act based on material nature, the three modes of nature. But the soul is not doing anything, and therefore is pure. It's not really responsible. It's not really evil. It has always been pure. It is spiritual by nature. If God was a golden mountain, then the soul would be a golden ring. Both are golden, but the mountain is huge and the ring is small. Nevertheless, they're both gold. They both have the same qualities. The qualities of being gold, let's say in this example, they're both valuable. So the soul, being spiritual in its ontology, carries the same qualities that God has himself. Namely, it's always pure. It does have true knowledge. It is eternal. It does have bliss itself. So therefore, it's also pure, but it is covered by these modes of material nature. It is covered by passion, ignorance, and goodness. It's covered by forgetfulness. It's covered by ignorance. But itself is pure. It's always pure. And the analogy that Tukaram brings up often, which I think is an excellent analogy, is imagine water from a sewer. Well, that water is disgusting. It will contaminate you, it will make you sick. So we can equate the sewer water to a rapist or Hitler or a Mao or a Stalin and say that's sewer water. However, if we scientifically analyze the molecules of water, the H2O has never been compromised. It is currently mixed and it is currently covered. It even changed colors. By all means, as far as, let's say, if I am not like a hardcore chemist and I can through a microscope and truly understand at the molecule level that the H2O that compromises the actual molecules of water has never been touched. If I don't have that, all I see is just dirty water, like straight evil, straight malevolence, straight bad stuff, dark stuff, right? And that's all that I can see. So by all means, it does seems like evil is coming from that water that is contaminated. But what happens if it is, let's say, continue to expand on this analogy. If it's an open sewer and then now the sun is hitting that water, what happens? Well, we all know, you don't have to be a hardcore scientist, that the water is going to evaporate and it becomes pure again. Now the question is, does it become pure again? Or was it always pure? But it is the case that it is now free from all the contaminating agents that was one covering. its pure state. That's actually what's happening. Any hardcore scientist could attest to this, that the H2O molecules of water has never been compromised by stool or urine or any other dirtiness that you can find in a sewer. That those molecules of water has never been compromised at that level. And it is factualized by the evaporation example, because if you evaporate water, if you distill water, that molecule of water is still there, as pure as it ever was. But it's very difficult to distinguish when it is in that contaminated, dirty state. You look at it and all you can see is dirty water. But at its essential state, it's the ontology of that water, right? It is H2O, it is uncontaminated. There is a process by which you can distill it. There's a process by which you can separate the ignorance, the forgetfulness in the soul's example, or the stool and the urine in the sewer example. There is a process by which you can separate that and then be again as pure as you ever was. Hence the pure soul theology. The soul is in the heart of the material body, but it is not being contaminated at its core, at its deepest level. How is it that we say the what is it Tukaram always says? It's skipping my mind. Like if you start with something big and you cut it down, there's a point that you get to that you can no longer cut down, right? That's the ultimate existence. That's the ultimate reality of that particular thing. What is it, Kim?
Irreducible?
Irreducible. The irreducible facet of reality, right? The irreducible states of the soul. When you dig in and you separate everything which is not, you take away everything which the soul is not, then you're left with only of what the soul is. At that level, the soul is always pure, similar to the H2O molecules of water. If you take away everything which is not, you're gonna come to the irreducible part of that molecule of water. And that is pure, that has always been pure. It was seemingly contaminated, but is always pure. So the irreducible facet of reality for the soul is pure, it's always pure. It's in the body. The body is acting based on the forces of material nature, but the soul is pure, always pure. That is a pure soul theology, which is contrasted from the Christian theology, which says that no, the soul inherently, because of the original sin between Adam and Eve, the soul is inherently bad and sinful. And only through, accepting Jesus Christ and so on, that you can become pure again, so you're only savior and so on. But the pure soul theology says something different. We're postulating the fact that the soul is never compromised. And these verses are exemplifying that. These verses are attesting to this pure soul theology, because it is saying, text 14, the embodied spirit, master of the city of his body, does not create activities, does not induce other people to act, does not create the fruits of actions. All this is enacted by the modes of material nature. So the soul is not doing any of this malevolence that transpires in the world. The soul is not doing it. The soul is not responsible for it. Why? Because the soul is always pure. So that is the pure soul theology, which again, I think is so relevant to talk about pure soul theology and the problem of evil together, because one complements the other so nicely.
Yeah, I love that analogy about the sewer water, because when you break it down at the molecular level, it just immediately makes sense. Like, oh, yeah, it is always separate. So it's a perfect analogy.
Yes. And I think it really captures, because yes, that is the soul. The soul is pure. The soul is pure. Like if we are part of Krishna, like the golden mountain in the golden ring, that golden ring, even though much smaller than the mountain, is still gold. it is still viable. You can still trade it for a lot of money. And it carries all the qualities of gold. So similarly, us, the spirit souls, the souls, being part of the Holy Spirit, which is Krishna, we are pure. We are always pure. We are pure like Krishna, but we are currently contaminated by the stool of egocentricity and by the urine of anger, you know, by the vomit of lust that you can find all this stuff in the sewer, you know. But then if you distill these things by the process of devotional service, that's the process of distilling ignorance, hate, lust, anger from the soul. The process that distills those things away from the soul is devotional service, which is so, it makes so much sense. It's so logical. I think anyone who is interested in a rational and reasonable theology or religion or spirituality could grasp these points and scrutinize them, subject them to scrutiny, philosophize about them, and you will see it is at least a valid argument. I would argue that it's a sound argument, but it is at least a valid argument, because the process of devotional service itself is simply putting you back in the position that you always are, or always, let's say, were prior to falling down in material existence. Devotional service means you start acting the way you were always acting in eternity, meaning you're serving God. You're serving Krishna. You're trying to please Krishna because you love him so much. And when you start acting like that again, you're distilling yourself from all which you are not. I am not this body. I'm not an African male. I'm Krishna's servant. I'm not a educated black man or uneducated black man who is a victim of systemic racism, or a educated black man who became the president of the United States of America and the most powerful man in the world. I'm neither one of those two. I'm actually Krishna's servant. I'm actually Krishna's lover. I'm actually part and parcel of Krishna. When I start acting like that again, I regain my state. All which I am not falls away. And I am left again with what I am, a lover of Krishna, pure as always, and now properly situated in my eternal dharma, which is to serve and love Krishna. And then in that state, Krishna then recognizes, okay, this soul now is again using her free will properly. And now you can be liberated from the clutches of material nature. You can come back here because now we can experience the best possible love, because you have used your free will to again serve me. By doing that, you yourself will eternally be happy, and you can be here in eternity being happy right now. It makes a whole lot of sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can speak from personal experience that as I started to learn more about the tradition, it just became a natural desire to want to help out. Like, oh, do you guys need help serving out prasadam or help cleaning up the temple? Or it just, and the way you describe it is once you get back into that mode of devotional service, it's your natural state of being.
Yes.
And so I can see how someone who perhaps is new to Krishna consciousness thinking, okay, well, that's great. You just told me it's all my fault, all my choices, this is my karma. And to what suggestions can you give for helping to bridge that gap of how do I get out of the cycle? You're talking about devotional service. I'm not there yet. Now you just made me feel really bad about myself. And I'm just cycling, chasing my tail. So as far as first steps and getting involved, what suggestions would you have for pulling someone out of that cycle?
My suggestion, unfortunately, would work for somebody who has at least a somewhat similar mentality as I do. What do I mean by that? I'm quite rational. I like to experience things with my philosophical faculties first. I like to analyze things. I like to study things. I like to philosophize about things. I like to read theology. That's who I am. So I think if I am to give a advice to someone, and if that advice is to be sincere, it has to come from my own experiences. So I'm only going to speak to that, to what helped me. And therefore, I believe the most sincere advice I can give would be for somebody who is more or less of that same nature, somebody who is philosophically inquiring. Where do I come from? Where do I go? When I die, is that the end of me, right? A person who naturally thinks that way, I would advise such a person to consider that we're going to die. That's a fact. Like, I'm going to start with absolute truths, right? That cannot be disputed. We're going to die. When we die, is that the end of me? There are no scientific reasons for why one should believe that, because as far as it can be stretched, it has never been proved that consciousness comes from matter. Consciousness does not come from matter. Otherwise, if it did, guess what materialistic society would have done already? They would have got the chemicals and they would have created consciousness. And those would be modern slaves or armies or workers in a factory and so on, would have been replaced by this laboratory-made consciousness that we can make with chemicals. So it cannot be done. It has never been done, and quite frankly, it will never be done. So there are no reasons why we should believe that I am matter, because I am, as far as I know, in my experience, the most reasonable fact is that I am conscious. If you doubt whether or not you're conscious, guess what you have to be in order to doubt whether or not you're conscious? You have to be conscious, because if you weren't conscious, you wouldn't be able to doubt whether or not you're conscious. So the very fact that you are wondering, am I conscious or not? Do I exist or not? Proves that you do exist through consciousness. So we're going to die. Our material body is going to die. That's a fact. That's an absolute truth. There's no reason for us to believe that the end of the body means the end of my conscious being. I am using these two premises to arrive at a conclusion that therefore I will survive the death of my body. Now the question is, then where do I go? Like, how do I continue to exist? Well, if I was once entrapped in this human body, I can certainly be entrapped in another human body. That means reincarnation. That's what we mean by reincarnation. If it happened once, why would it not happen again? If my conscious being, if my spirit soul, that from which consciousness comes from, the soul, was once entrapped in a human body, it can be entrapped in another human body again. Then I would think an intelligent person would therefore ask, well then, what is the best type of body I should have next? Should it be a human body? Am I limited to human incarnations? Could I go to an animal body? Why not? As far as I can see, animals are conscious. If I pinch them, they cry. If I stab them with a knife, that's what happens to cows in a slaughterhouse, by the way. They will put cows in a boiling tank of oil or slit their throat with a knife. Guess what the cows do? They cry in agony and pain. What is necessary in order for that to be a visible phenomenon? Consciousness. There has to be consciousness that became aware of the pain that the body was going through in order to manifest crying and painful symptoms. So, could my consciousness go to an animal body? I believe so. These animals are conscious. They are expressing the symptoms of consciousness just like we are. Less intelligence doesn't mean no consciousness. They may be less intelligent than us, nevertheless, they're conscious. So then what type of body should I have next? Animal body, another human body, demigod body? These angels in Western traditions would be angels, right? Or in our tradition, they're called demigods. Demigod's body, what type of body should I have next? You would be the best possible body. You would strive for that. A body that transcends material existence, spiritual body, or another body that brings you back to material existence, but in a better place. That's what we mean by heaven. Another body that takes you to a lower existence. That's what we mean by hell. Temporary hell, not eternal hell, but temporary hell. So what kind of body? So then now I can see how big things really are. Like we were discussing earlier in the podcast, I am a small part of something much bigger. Now I am spirit soul, that which carry consciousness, entrapped in a body which must die and get another body, because the end of the body is not the end of consciousness. Then now which body? So now and then I can go up, I can go down, I can go to a heavenly planet, I can go to a hellish planet, I can go to another human body on earth, I can go to an animal body on earth, right? So all this is dictated by my actions in the present moment. What I do now is going to dictate what happens to me later, after death. Why do we stop at that? Why are we talking about, oh, my 401k? So that after my retirement, I can still live properly. Why stop there? A devotee thinks much longer, much long term, right? Why stop at death? Why not? What is my retirement account for after death? Like, what is going to be there? That's what we call that karma. My retirement accounts after death is my karma. It's going to take me to my next body. So what body? In which place? Another body in heaven, another body in hell, another animal or human body. Or why not? And to me, this is my advice, right? Why not? If I am spiritual, if I am eternal, why not my eternal spiritual body? If I am eternal, why must I die? If I am eternal, why do I experience death? Death, by the way, sucks, right? It must sucks because it's going to ruin your day, and everybody who loves you is going to ruin their day, and it's a terrible experience. It's painful, suffering. It's terrible for everybody around you. So why are we dying? Why do we have to go to the experience of death if we are eternal? So an intelligent person, a person who is philosophically asking these questions, then the question would be, why not my eternal spiritual body, where I transcend the material reality altogether and I never have to die again, and I can be eternally blissful again? Why not that body? If we think very linearly, as we just did here, all these premises are at least valid. I conceive of these premises as being sound, and therefore these conclusions are also sound. I am eternal spiritual soul, and therefore I should go back to my eternal spiritual existence. So what is my advice to somebody who wants to start? Well, I'm not there yet. Well, think about the long term. Think about, do you want to come back in another body? Potentially better or lower, upper or higher? Do you want to start all over again? Do you want to go to kindergarten again, and grade school again, and high school again, and college again, and get a master's degree again, or a PhD again, and get another divorce, and get another diabetes experience, or Alzheimer, or Parkinson's, or just happy from birth to death, but inevitably you die, and then there goes your perfect marriage of 40 years. Do you want to do all that again? Like, when is it enough? Like, think about those long-term possibilities, and then realize that yes, it is possible. I am spirit soul, and I am going to therefore start engaging in a bona fide method. That would be another advice. A lot of people are preaching spirituality and religion to make money or to have a following. So let's understand, what is a bona fide tradition? What does it look like? Are the preachers of that tradition following the lifestyle that they are preaching? And find such bona fide path, engage in it, and attain your next, your best possible body next. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, I like that. Very logical and very systematic too.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess it works only for somebody who is logical and systematic in their mentality. But you know, I can attempt if philosophy and reason and theology and studying scriptures is not really your cup of tea, then I would suggest be around people that are following bona fide spiritual traditions and experience what is it like to be in a community that truly cares about you, that truly have experienced for themselves what is it like to attain peace. That's what Krishna is giving us here in the early chapters of Gita. He's talking about how we can be peaceful in the world. Associate with people that have made progress in the spiritual, in a bona fide spiritual path, and experience for yourself their peace, experience for yourself their happiness, experience for yourself the way in which they are compassionate to every living thing, to every human being, to every animal, and experience that firsthand yourself. You're going to be showered with their love. You're going to be showered with their compassion. You're going to be humbled in their presence because they are extremely humble. And you're going to become humble because they are so humble. They are treating you as if they are your servants. And when you experience that naturally, because you are a pure soul, you're going to reciprocate with that. And then if you're in the presence of somebody who is humble, if you're in the presence of somebody who is peaceful and compassionate, you're going to become like that. And you're going to want to reciprocate with that. And now I'm talking about sentiments, right? At first, I spoke about reason, philosophy, rational. Now I'm talking about feelings and sentiments and compassion and peace. You can associate with those who have it and therefore experience yourself. Once you start experiencing that peace, once you start experiencing that more permanent happiness, then you're going to accept the process by which you are attaining these things as truth. And then you're going to make more and more progress in that path. By associating with those who have it, you're going to be contaminated. If you go around people with COVID-19 and they're expressing all those symptoms of having COVID-19, they have high fever, etc., and they're coughing and sneezing, and you're around them, guess what you're going to have? You're going to get COVID-19. If you're around people that are humble, peaceful, blissful, and knowledgeable, rational, compassionate, that's what you're going to get. And then your life will also be peaceful and successful, because either through being humble, being peaceful, being compassionate, you're going to get the knowledge, the philosophical knowledge, or by getting the philosophical knowledge, you're going to be humble and peaceful. So it's one or the other. By doing one, you attain the results of both.
Yeah, I like that suggestion about the association that you choose. And it is a choice. I have some counseling clients, and typically the idea behind suffering and very intense suffering where people can't get out of these cycles is the idea that I want to do the right thing. I know what the right thing is on paper, but I can't do it. Kind of like they're stuck, like they don't have the power to make changes. And things are never going to change until you find something higher to exchange these bad, we'll call them, choices that you're making. And so at some point, it comes down to choice. It comes down to getting in the lab. That's what made me start chanting, is after I'd been coming around a while, I heard about the chanting of the mantra, chanting of the holy names. I really liked that concept of, we're not really asking for anything technically, it's just chanting the holy names of God. And that really appealed to me. Just what a simple concept that was.
Mm-hmm.
And the transcendental sound vibration that's associated with it. So I just got in the lab and I tried it. And then that leads to another step of associating with people from the temple. And when you find that association that you mentioned, it really highlights where you are not, where you want to be, And it's everything when it comes to your spiritual practice. So we're not, at least in our Western society, we're not designed to go live in a cave and meditate 24/7. So I like that advice.
That's an excellent point. The higher taste, right? The higher taste by association. If you have a higher taste, if you have a taste which is higher, you cannot go of your taste that was lower. And in this example, the association is what's going to give you the higher taste. When you are in the presence of somebody who is truly peaceful, and that will give you the higher taste of peace, it is going to be so much easier for you to let go of anxiety and anger, because now you have experienced the higher taste of peace. When you are around people that are truly loving, that they really love you for who you are, a pure soul, not a black, white, male, female body, they truly love you for who you truly are. In that experience of their higher taste is going to make so much easier for you to let go of your lower lust. And lust is a perverted reflection of love. Lust directed in the proper way is love. We love God with the same intensity that lusty people enjoy sex here. In this, like the same intensity. If you can conceive of, I don't know, like I'm trying to conceive of the peak, right? Let's say you are a 24-year-old male full of hormones. Let's say if you have a good-looking body and you are at the beach and there's all these female bodies, young, like that intensity, like you're so attractive, you're looking and you're planning and you're plotting, and that consumes your mind, like the intense lust. That is the exact experience of a spiritualist, but it's love for God. Their attraction is God. What they want to do, what they're plotting, what gets their hormones going is love of God. You know, so the experience of the higher taste will always allow you to let go of the lower taste, and you can get that by associating with those who have it. So yes, that is definitely perhaps the best first step for somebody who is trying to embrace these topics, these experiences that we are talking about here.
Yeah, excellent. All right. Well, I
All right,
think that's a
so
pretty good.
in 2 hours, we troubleshot the problems of 2 millennia. So we went long. It's definitely a long episode. But hey, considering that for 2,000 years, people have been trying to solve these problems, and we solved them in 2 hours, we're good.
Well, I like that positive attitude. Who knows what we'll be solving next week?
Problem solved. Like Prabhupada said it, right? Very simply, very profoundly, full of truth, and so many other truths that I'm seeing to Gita now, and we can talk about some other time. Prabhupada simply said, chant and be happy. That's
Yeah,
it.
perfect advice.
Chant and be happy.
All right. Well, thank you, Tadeo. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And we'll post a link to Tukram Prabhu's Gita class. I highly encourage you to listen to it because he did such a beautiful job whenever he speaks. It's very poetic, and he really describes so vividly just the roadmap of love of God and highlighting Krishna's mercy. And he's an eloquent, dynamic speaker, and you'll never be bored. So I highly encourage you to tune into his classes every Friday night. So, all right. Well, thank you. And we'll see you next week. And Haribol.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, and Haribol. See you next week.